now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Kramer Bussell, editor-in-chief of Open Secrets magazine. I'm here. Dana, I'm so sorry. How do I say your last name?
Dubois.
Dubois. I was like, I should know this because I listen to you, but Dana
Okay.
Dubois. I'm very excited to chat with her. This is Saturday, June 20th, the day before Father's Day.
Yes.
And we are going to be talking about what it's like to have a complicated relationship with fathers, stepfathers, and Father's Day.
Yes.
Dana wrote a wonderful essay for Open Secrets this week, which I just want to make sure I get the title right because I am a bit like, it's called "What Do I Owe a Father Who Betrayed My Trust?" And the subheading is "He Stole Millions from Investors. What He Took from Me is Harder to Replace." And on her own Substack, which is at Dana Dubois Writes.substack.com, she has several essays about her own father and how his dementia changed his personality. So I want to get into those topics, but first I just want to talk about your general approach to your writing because you write about your parents, your children, you being a mother, relationships, like seems like pretty much everything is on the table.
Yeah.
Did that come naturally to you, or is that something you had to work towards?
That's a
Like
really
being that
good
open?
question. Yeah, I think what you're asking in that is like, how do you write about people you know in real life?
Well,
Is that
yes, and being so honest because it does not. I mean, it may be that you hold things back, but it does not seem like you hold things back in terms of your feelings and thoughts not that you're trying to speak for these other people, but I think that is something that a lot of people struggle with. Like being honest, but knowing that those people might read your work or someone might read it and speak to them about it. I think that's a big fear for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I'm laughing right now because I see folks who know me know that my dog Kira, when she sees me go online, can you see her right there?
Yes.
Um, this is my running joke that one day my podcast will be sponsored by Nature Knots because this is what she wants. So pardon me for a moment while I'm very human and we give the dog the treat that lets me talk without her bugging me. I have trained her to have some very bad behavior there. Um, yes, it comes naturally to write about my own lived experience. And there are topics I don't write about because they're private and I don't. But uh, I'm, I'm hesitating to answer this a little bit because I would say it differs by person and by situation. And there is an element of my father is not able to read my essays. And even if he somehow could read them and hear them, he wouldn't remember it a few minutes later. And so it does very much feel like writing about someone after they're gone. Because the father who I knew and grew up with, he is gone. And so that's easy in a way. There are when I'm writing about dating and men who either I'm involved with or have been involved with, that is a different line. And where I tend to draw it is like if you are someone who is a part of my life and remains like a positive, good part of my life, if I am writing about you, I will always run it by you first to make sure you're okay with the way you're being represented. But if you are not, I'm saying that and I'm pausing a little, and I'm going to come back to that. There's a little pin I'm going to put in there. But for the most part, that's what I do. But if you are in my rearview mirror, I will write about my lived experience because it's mine to share.
Is one of those easier to do than the other? I mean, I guess, is it easier to write about like things from childhood or things from the past than things happening right now with people who might be reading it?
1,000% yes. It's funny you ask because so when I Write Out Loud, which is my publication that lives at Dana Dubois Writes.substack.com, I publish a new essay every Monday. And I'm working on the one for this Monday, that's getting late for me. I like to have it locked and loaded by Saturday, but it's because it's about something current it's a relationship story, and it has a lot to do with a relationship that is just ended or is in mid transition. I'm not quite sure what we're going to be to each other, and a big chunk of the essay has that as a central theme. And so it's in this gray area of, do I need to run this past him? We're not actually talking right now, so I don't think I can. And it's way harder. There's so much more nuance, and I'm so much more aware of who I'm not writing for this person, but I'm very aware that they're going to be in the audience, and that does get in the way of the flow of writing.
I was
What
going
it,
to ask, like,
yes.
what do you see as the purpose of your writing, both for yourself and
Mm.
the purpose of sharing it? Because I mean, you have a very large following, and people are, especially when you're writing about, let's say, your parenting essays about gender fluidity. I think people are. My impression is looking at you for maybe guidance or, what would I do or how can I handle a similar situation? Well, before I go further with my analysis, let me ask you, like, what does the writing do for you on a personal level? And then I guess we could talk about the publishing of it.
That's such a great question. I have to. This is a funny fact about me, and maybe why I write is that I don't always process that well in real time. That
Same. I know,
especially
same. I
that
was like nervous. I mean, even though that's I wasn't nervous when you interviewed me. Like you don't make me nervous, but just I also get a little
yeah,
tongue
I
tied in person. So if you want to
I
skip or go back to it, but I'm
no, I think I could answer it. I'm trying to decide where I want my camera. Sorry, I already moved it once because I thought it was too close in, and now I think it's too high up, and I feel like I'm like a little kid looking up at you. So the podcast I was just on was using StreamYard, which does a wider lens. There, I think that's better. I feel like we're more face to face, and that I'm not looking up at my camera. One day, I'm going to have a production studio built in my former garage, but that day is not today. Right now, we're in my dining room, just doing it lo-fi. Um, so, why am I writing it? Part of it, I think, is that I don't. I am slow to process emotionally. It takes me when I was younger, it probably took me years sometimes to realize how I was feeling in a moment. That has sped up a lot, but it is hard for me, like if I'm in a contentious situation with a family member or someone I'm dating or or a friend, I often need to be like, I need to stop and think. I need to come back to this in a day or a week or a month. And essay writing, I can take all the time I need. And this is a very strange thing to say, but in my best essays, I think I figure out a truth from myself as I'm writing it. And that sounds a little crazy, but
not
it's
to me.
100% true that especially there's one essay in particular I wrote about my dad. I posted it to Substack a couple months ago. I should go find it, but I wrote it right after a visit with him, and he was during this visit, he kept perseverating on this same question of, I told him that my oldest daughter could drive, and he kept saying, she can drive now? And every time he veered in the conversation into things that weren't true, I would kind of bring him back to reality by telling him these stories about my kids, and he would very much glom onto that. And it was the first visit where he was not reality based in his dementia, that he was like telling about his time in the war and telling about what a, great loving dad and grandfather he'd been, which really was not true. Um, and I came at that story by writing all the component pieces. And I'm doing this because we were driving. We were on a 6-hour road trip, and I was literally in the backseat of my mom and her boyfriend's car, like blurting this out on my thumbs for the initial draft. And am I using the right mug? Yes, I was. I was writing drunk. You have
Mm.
to write drunk and edit sober. And all these thoughts came out. And then later that evening at our Airbnb, I organized, like, I read back my words, and I was like, cling, the narrative arc clicked in of, oh, he wants to be remembered for something he wasn't, because at some core level, even through his dementia, he knows he didn't live the honorable life he wanted to live, but he wants me, his oldest child, the one who will tell his stories, to remember him. in a different way. And what a sad, like deeply tragic conclusion that was. But there was such a beauty in recognizing it. And then him coming back to this reality about my daughter and her ability to drive now became this narrative device of how I told each story and how I brought him gently back to reality from the falsehoods. But I didn't contradict him because, like, let him have his peace. That was the ultimate gift I could give him, was like, obviously I don't believe it was true. I know he wasn't a fighter pilot in World War II. He was born in 1944 and he was never in the military. But like, let him, like, the gift I can give him as his child is not to remember him that way, because I know that it's not true, but I can let him be at peace with it and just redirect him gently. So I write, to come back to your question, sometimes I have to write it to figure out what happened and to make peace with what happened, or just to understand it. That's why I write it, and I share it because, well, for many reasons, but the big one is I know a lot of people will relate to this work, and I love storytelling, and I think storytelling is ultimately how we find and connect with one another, whether it's in real life, sharing the stories of our lives, or if it's as a writer or podcaster. Sharing these stories helps us find universal truths. In some of the more kind of feminist and political leaning ones, I think telling our stories helps move our culture, which helps move our politics ultimately. So these are the reasons that I share. That, and also because this is my life's work. This is my real life's work. And, you know, I'm proud of it. I want to share it with the world. So I think those are like three different answers, but they're all
No,
equally true.
those all also work together. Those make sense. I know people want to talk about. We're talking about Father's Day, which is tomorrow. Um, so I haven't read all your essays about your dad, but I read the recent one, and I was reading an older one about uh like his anger as when you were a child, and like grappling with that. Well, they're both about that, but I'm curious if writing about him and the recent one about your stepfather, which you can recap them. I don't want to. I'll let you recap, but has writing about those troubled relationships helped you make peace with that?
100%. Yes. Hold on here. When I was having trouble joining earlier, sorry, I'm the reason we started late because I couldn't quite get in the chat. I lost the windows because I had the essays open. Um, yes, it's 100% helped me process what had happened. And the response that these essays have gotten, the responses, um, they've been beautiful. Like, people have shared their own stories. They have commiserated with mine. They have provided words of comfort and words of encouragement on some of them that have been really interesting. Which essay should we talk about first? Do we want to talk about the one that's in Open Secrets about
Sure.
my
Yeah.
stepfather?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the one I'm opening up right now. And hold on, it's opening up in the comment section. Here it is. I'm going to put it in the chat. Can you tell I'm a podcast host? Like, hi, everybody. Let's put this in the chat. First, I want to say thank you for running this story, Rachel. When we first met, you were on the Daily Whatever show and you were talking about Open Secrets magazine. And this was the story that was in my mind that I was like, I love the title of Open Secrets. What happened to my stepfather is not a secret, but it's not something I typically lead with in conversation, because it is a really hard subject. And I was like, I hope Rachel will take this essay around Father's Day. So I'm just thrilled that it found a home here.
Well,
I
it's a
love
very
the
perfect Open Secrets story. And I say that not just because it is about this big secret that you revealed, but it's just so personal and it's complicated. Like, I think it would be easy to say, okay, someone did something which I'll let you share what they did, but and it forever like ruptured our relationship and the end. But like, I think you grapple with that is still complicated, like, that you can hold 2 feelings at once for someone or more than 2, and I think you
Yes.
do that in the essays about your dad too, and I think that is part of what makes it relatable for a lot of people because I think if an emotion is I mean, if it's very easy to cut someone out of your life, then you kind of can move on
Just do it.
and not you don't have to necessarily process it on the page. I mean, maybe you do,
Right.
but, like, it's easier to, but I think when there are complexities, it it makes it more challenging to hold those truths, together. So,
Thank you.
so, ho
Yeah.
um yeah, well, first, can you just kind of, like, recap for people who haven't read it yet? I mean, and not everyone, please do read it, but just so people know what we're talking about.
Thank
And then, yeah, and this one I was also really curious about, because I think you are also talking about someone else's personal experiences here, and
Right.
and it's something I don't know if I would say I struggle with, but I do think about it a lot, like, especially with family, like, when I'm sharing something and then, like, my mom has dementia, for example, and I have a lot of stories that I wanna share about my experience, but it's hard because they are
'Cause
also
it's
her
also there.
experiences, and she
Yes.
is with it enough that she doesn't, like, seek out my writing or anything, but if it was in a prominent enough place, like, it might get passed back to her, and they do think about that when I'm thinking about how to approach the writing.
I mean, I didn't repost this to my Facebook because I don't want my former stepfather to see this story particularly.
Yeah,
If he sees it, I would own it. I'm not ashamed of it at all. Um, but I don't want to re-engage. So,
yeah,
so yes, I hear you on that front. And it is personal, but it's also Googleable. It's not. It's public record. So I'll speak a bit about the story. Um, and I'm glad that you brought up my father first because those two stories go together. That I grew up with this very kind of angry, aggressive father. So it wasn't a great relationship. I do think he did the best that he could by us and that he was the victim of verbal abuse, likely too. I didn't know. His mother died before I was born. His father died when I was pretty young, but I can connect the dots to see that it is a cycle of abuse. Doesn't change the way I grew up. But my parents split when I was a mid teenager, and my mom met the man who would go on to become my stepfather shortly thereafter. So I was 16, I think, 16 or 17. And outwardly, this man looked a lot like my dad, but he was totally different. He was super chill and loving and non judgmental in ways that I didn't really have in my certainly not in my father's story. And he and my mom were together for decades. And he was very much he was very healing for me. He was the father figure that I didn't have in my own father. Um, and it was a lovely relationship and a good one. And even as his relationship with my mom devolved and they eventually divorced, we still kept in touch and had a pretty good relationship. What the story chronicles, you glommed onto this when you first saw the story too. It begins like a lot of my essays do with a very sort of slice of life anecdote, talking about a memory of I'm being very slow because I don't want to accidentally say his real name, but Arthur, as I called him in the story, um, always loved fruit, and at night he would like just make these like cut up and bring in these massive plates of fruit and like watch TV and eat them. And my mom is super into fitness and would be like, your triglycerides are high, and would chastise him. And I acknowledge that they're both right. That like he was right to savor and to enjoy what gave him pleasure, right? He just loved these plates of fresh fruit. And she was right to say your triglycerides are high and you shouldn't eat so much fruit. And that difference between them is sort of echoed throughout this whole story. And it was echoed through how it rolled out in real life too, for us. Um, they eventually split, and big part of the reason they split was that his daughter, who was a little younger than I am, fell in love with a man who was in prison. I won't even get into all the backstory of how and why she started writing to a man in prison, but she did. And to my amazement and my mother's horror, my stepdad formed a relationship with this man, would go and visit with his daughter. And it really was the final straw for their relationship because my mom was like, "What are you doing? This is a criminal serving a lot of time for white collar fraud kind of stuff." And again, they were both right that he was like, "My daughter loves this guy. I'm going to get to know him." And I was like, wow, I've never known that kind of unconditional support in my family of origin. And also, my mother was completely right of like, what are you doing taking this seriously and validating it? You should be warning her against it. He can't forbid it. She's an adult. Holding both of those truths, right? They were both true. But it also ended up being his undoing because once this guy got out of prison, they formed some kind of equity investment company and they defrauded a lot of people out of a lot of money and they were caught and he went to prison. And when that happened, by then they had been he and my mom had been apart for a long time. And so we were kind of watching from the sidelines. Like I'd see Facebook updates and be like, how do they have an investment company? He's a felon, this guy. How does that all work? But I was like, not my problem. What's that? Not my monkey, not my circus. It lightly became my circus. He did ask me to write a note for the judge. Sometimes in cases like this, when it comes to sentencing, they want personal, like this person impacted me positively, and that tends to lighten sentencing. So I provided that. And I was the email notification, one of them, that when he went into prison, I got the mail saying so-and-so has been incarcerated. And I just wept of like, oh my gosh, he's in his 70s now. He's got a few years sentence. Like, I don't know if he'll live to come out the other end of this. He did. He's out now, but he won't have fresh fruit. This thing that he loved so much. And how deeply sad that made me for both of us of like, and the fruit is sort of representing the joy that he took in life, but that he leaned in so hard that it just was too big of a rupture. And I'm exploring that at the end of this essay of like, does it undo all of the good that he was to me? And in the end, it was like, it has been a yes. We have a very, like, he just texted me yesterday to wish my daughter a happy graduation. He texts me on Mother's Day. He texts me on birthdays still, and I sometimes respond and I sometimes don't. I'm not opening the door. It was just a step too far.
I mean,
me.
I think two things that I thought were like extra heartbreaking about the situation were that you did kind of get a second chance to have a father figure who could be there for you, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
And then to have that taken away, um, I thought that was really heartbreaking. But I was also glad that you did have that. Like that, I think it's very easy to divide people into, okay, well, like you did this terrible thing, so you're a terrible person, and then like
Right.
I think it's hard for people to, and I'm not saying that takes away from the terrible thing, but like I'm glad that he was able to be that positive figure for you and
Yeah,
help
me too.
guide you, even though he was also falling down this path that was clearly not a good one.
Right? It is such a destabilizing thing to realize someone who you implicitly trust um, is capable of doing something so egregious. And in the essay, I quote Walt Whitman that, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." And that theme weaves through of like, e- even though he did something really awful, it doesn't undo the good that we had. Like I don't. Those two things can both be 100% true. And I think, like you were saying earlier, an essay that's very straightforward of like, I knew this person, they did something bad, I cut them off, we're done, is to me a lot less interesting something I probably wouldn't write. That would be like a blog post, right? Letting you all know we're not friends anymore. Most of life is nuance and realizing, like, yes, it's very destabilizing that someone I trusted implicitly did something that did so much harm to people. And also, it doesn't change who he was to me before all that happened. That is all still true. I don't have to look back and be like, that undoes everything. It paints it all in this ugly picture. It doesn't. I hold him with a lot of regard for everything that he was. And also, it's okay to say, and going forward, this was a rift, like a rupture that I have not been able to get over. It's now been 7 years, and I still, like, I wish him well, but I can't re-engage. It's just too egregious. And it's the response to this essay is interesting because I think there are people who read it. And I've talked about it a bit on lives who have been like, if unconditional love, um, you should not hold someone to the worst moment that they ever were. And I'm like, I hear you. And also, this was a pretty big worst moment.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's kind of like when, I mean, not it's not the same thing, but when someone's accused of something like violence against someone and when their
Yeah.
close family members are saying, well, or they're even their neighbor, like they were such a nice guy. I mean, those can be true, but that doesn't, I think it's up to each person to decide, like, does what they did to someone else, how does that impact the current, your current understanding of them, because they are a different person to you after that. Like, it's not like you can unknow it.
Absolutely. If he had done something physically violent to someone, I would not have written that note. And you could argue robbing people of their life savings i- is it's not an act of violence, but it is an act of immense harm. Um, but yeah, there are things that, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of like life circumstances where, like, yeah, you learned that, yeah, like a man, if he had committed violence against somebody, it would be different. There is something about a man who is capable of physically injuring somebody or killing somebody that is always going to be worse to me than an act of financial harm, even though, I mean, I think that his victims got restitution. I think that he had assets and they got paid back, but I'm sure immense stress to them.
Did you at all resent being asked to write the letter? Or how did you feel about being asked to write the letter?
Um,
Because that's a
Conflicted.
pretty heavy thing to ask.
It, yes, robbing people is a kind of violence. You are correct, Chris. And it is not the same thing as like a sexual assault or a murder. It's just not still, even though it is awful. How did I feel ready? When he asked, it was conflicted. It was a mix of emotions. There was a sense of, but of course, that I think was at the top of it, of like, I write about this in the essay that, like, he was someone who was very empathetic and kind and supportive in a very non-judgmental way that was singular in my life at the time, and so appreciated. And I was like, I need to show him that same regard back. And I don't need to comment on the crime that he did. What he's asking is for someone who can vouch for the man who he was to them. And I can do that. Everything I write, I couldn't have written it if it felt disingenuous, but everything I wrote in that letter was true. So I was able to write it. And it was also I was like, he's still going to be punished for what he did. Um, but, I feel like the punishment met the crime. I'm pretty sure that must have been financially decimating for him, to have to pay everybody back the time in prison. He's a man now in his, how old is he now? I think he's 79 now. So, like, you don't come back from this. Like, there's
Yeah.
the the amount of time served was plenty. I hope it was lessened by the note that I sent. I don't know what the average jail sentence is for anything like that. That's not a world I know much about. But he said the letter made him cry, and I felt good about that. He knew that someone cared about him, because I did, and I do at a certain level, but like it has to be over here. I'm also like, my kids were pretty young when all of this happened, and so that was part of the call, was like, does he still get to be part of their lives? And that was a hard no. It was just like, they won't really remember much, and now they know what happened because they're older, but it's no.
I feel like now might be a good time to share the essay, the recent one about your dad, because I feel like they are in a way inverse, because your
Yeah.
relationship with your stepfather started and for many years was really positive, and then this thing happened, and then and then you decided to back away from that relationship, and it seems like with your father in many ways it's the opposite trajectory, where there
Yeah.
was so much contention and anger and just not a good relationship growing up, and then not that it's perfect now, but that his anger has minimized because he has dementia. And I mean, I guess it's a question, and you bring it up, I know, in one of your essays, that you could have walked away from that relationship too,
Yes.
but you didn't. And I mean, you're not, I mean, you're not like, so I was going to say, you're not like going overboard necessarily with it, but you're not totally removing yourself, and you could, and
Mhm.
rightly so, after growing up in that way. So maybe you can summarize that situation, and then talk about, like, what has that process been like of reconciling the man your dad is now with dementia,
Yeah.
who is needier and who is less angry, with this older version of him, and this kind of rose-colored glasses way that he paints himself.
These are great questions. And what an interesting way to frame it. I can tell you're a memoirist, that you were like, and here's the dot connection. One went from this very positive figure and had his downfall, and the other was a very hard to love sort of dad who has had the opposite arc of
Well,
becoming
I
more
also
loving.
wanna ask, this is semi-related, but, like,
Yeah.
in the headline of your Open Secrets essay, you say, "What do I owe a father who betrayed my trust?" And you're talking about your stepfather, and you're calling him your
Mhm.
father because he was this figure to you. So I'm curious if him being your stepfather and having been divorced from your mom, um, at the time that he went to prison, like, does blood, being a blood relation, matter in all of this? Like, do you think that, and obviously this is theoretical, but if he had been your father,
Mhm.
do you think that you would have the same trajectory with what happened with Arthur, your stepfather? I mean, and I obviously that's theoretical, and you don't have to answer that, but it made me think about it, because I think that, first of all, our society, especially for women, we are taught that we owe things to our, family of origin, that, you know, we may feel differently, but I think there is this cultural pressure to maintain those relationships. Um,
This
and
is
so,
a fascinating question, and I have never thought about it. I'm also, hold on. I realize I want to share on my wall that we're live right now so that more people find this conversation. I meant to do that when we first started. Okay, it's posted. Um, that is a fascinating question, and I can't believe I hadn't considered it. If my father had done what my stepfather did, would I have been keeping the same amount of distance?
I
I'm
mean,
not
it's
sure.
obviously
I
it's
have not.
it's a theoretical, but it,
It
it did
is,
make me
but
think
it's
about it, because I
yes.
think the step parent relationship is different. And I mean, I also say that as someone who, my mom is also now divorced from my stepfather, and not we were never that close. Like, we were casually close, not contentious,
Yeah.
but not like that. But now it's pretty distant, and I think it can be easier to walk away from those kinds of relationships, because not just because of biology, but also because of, like, they were attached to your parent and then they're not, and so, like, there's a more of a just natural distance.
Yeah. I uh, th this is fascinating, and you've given me a topic for my next essay, because there is a huge cultural conversation right now about adult children, like,
And
shutting
estrangement.
this
Yeah,
estrangement.
yeah.
This is a millennial thing, and I am Gen X. Um, I think there's a lot that's very healthy about that conversation where, if someone is doing you immense harm, even if it is your parent or someone from your family of origin, it is okay to close the door. Sometimes you have to. But Gen X wasn't raised that way. And that has very much the reason I've never cut my own father off and that I have kept a distant but consistent relationship with him is because I couldn't live with myself easily doing that to him. I
And I think
established the
especially
boundaries. Yeah.
that he has dementia, I think that really raises the stakes,
Yeah,
I would
absolutely now,
imagine.
but the cutoff question thoughts were years ago.
Mm.
And, I moved across the country. I only talked to him and his wife, who has since passed, a few times, maybe once a month or so. I would visit with them once a year, maybe, and it was uncomfortable, but I took on the discomfort versus absolute estrangement because it would, um oh my god, the thought coming to mind is it's a form of a Horcrux. I'm sorry I'm evoking J.K. Rowling. I know she's a transphobe and horrible. I still love Harry Potter. Do you remember the whole idea of Horcruxes with
I don't remember.
Voldemort?
I did read the early ones, but I don't remember that.
Okay, so you wouldn't have gotten to Horcruxes if you only read the later ones, and I'm nerding out a little bit here. The idea is that a Horcrux, it happens when you murder someone, or when you do a very violent crime. In the books, it's murder, and it means like it sort of tears your heart apart, your soul apart. But the evil guy uses it to divide himself into 7 different pieces so that he's immortal. But the idea that I love about that is that when you commit an act of violence, and it doesn't have to be physical violence, but well, in the case of this, it does. When you commit an act of violence, it tears your soul, and completely estranging a parent who was not great and was difficult, but who ultimately also had, his own family of origin issues. Like, that would have damaged me too much, I think, to do it. Um, Sorry, I just had to plug my phone and it's running out of power. So turn my
I understand. Well, and then go on.
yeah, and sorry, just to continue on with that, of even if he'd gone to prison, I'm like, would I have and committed those crimes? Would I be able to cut him off, my blood relative? Maybe then. But there was an essay I wrote a few months ago, and I'm outlining when I went back in February with my daughters, and my older daughter really didn't want to go to memory care to visit him. And I forced my kids to go with me because I was like, it's the 1 hour a year you spend with your grandfather. We're going. I know it'll be weird and uncomfortable. And how in the past we'd always kind of laughed about it. It was just sort of like, oh, that's just grandpa being weird. Um, but one of his limitations as a father is, there's a lot of misogyny there, and it was sort of the only recognizing women for how they look. And he's always with my daughters. He's always very like, "You're so pretty. You're so beautiful." And really, that trip in particular focused on my older daughter, who is beautiful, and just kept repeating, "You're so beautiful. You're so beautiful." And she just, the way she like folded in on herself, and it was so hard for her. I wrote about that and sort of around that nuance of like, what do we owe our aging, demented family? And I had some people come at me and be like, "That's child abuse, what you did to your daughter.
Mm.
She's gonna cut you off one day because of what you're forcing her to do." And people called me out of like, "You are doing that Gen X thing of taking on abuse that you don't need to take on." And I was like, have I? So I've been examining this a lot in my own mind. And where I keep netting out is like, I think it's so complicated, but when they are like, I don't when his life ends, and it's certainly like he's 81, he's in poor health, he lives in a memory care. I wanna feel like I was honorable to him. And I didn't move him out west where I live when he went memory care. I only see him a couple times a year. These are the boundaries that I can live with. Um, and they are still like a lot less than I wish I had with a father. If I had a different father, it would be different. Maybe I would have flown him out here and made sure I could go visit him every week or two, but or just be there when, he got sick a couple weeks ago and he had to go to the hospital. Like, we have full-time aides who are with him in addition to the nursing facility he lives in, and they went with him to the hospital. Like, that's the kindness that my brother and I do for him, but we're not there, and I'm
Well,
okay
I
with
think you have to protect your own mental health. I mean,
that.
it's very hard. I mean, I don't know all the details, but, like, I know a lot of dementia caregivers, and it's pretty brutal.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying it is not hard to be someone with
yeah,
dementia, but I think there are also ways there that on some level it's a little bit easier because you don't know everything. And I
yeah.
think we do know so much and we can't like unknow it. Um,
Right.
but that
There are a
brings
lot
me.
of really Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go.
So to say there are a lot of wonderful comments coming in the chat, about like yep. Shelana is saying, I'm also Gen X and I cannot just cut my mom off. She's just like night and day with me, but she's not a criminal, but it's that sense of, um, we feel a sense of obligation to the people who raised us. And maybe it's my programming as a Gen X person, but I'm like, and we should. If you are like, I feel like that this might be a controversial statement, but I'm going to say it anyways. Like, if you are going to cut a parent off, um, versus limiting contact, like, you need to be really certain that it is so egregious that you cannot make it work. That should be a last resort, like, absolute, like, panic button push. I have to do this, but um, and there are cases I know people who have done this who absolutely needed to do this. So I can't make my experience everyone's. But think about I do think that with people who are young, yeah, adults who are younger than I am, that there may be a bit, because it's a cultural conversation, there may be a bit of like laissez-faire, blasé, sort of like, oh, they wouldn't do this, and so I cut them off. Where I'm like, the people who raised you are deeply flawed because every human is deeply flawed. We just know about them more when they're our own family members. And there's a pretty good chance that they also did their best. And you need to like keep your framing around that because you need to protect your own soul and spirit.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean, I think it's hard because we don't we're only living our own lives. Like, we don't know what
exactly.
it feels like to be that person in that situation. But I wanna ask you this, and I'm sorry if I'm talking over you, like, I have ADHD, and I know I'm gonna
No, no,
forget if I don't ask you. So,
please
what you
go.
were talking about in that essay, which, we can put it's called, "I Made My Daughter Visit Her Misogynistic Grandfather."
Oh yeah.
Um, uh, I'm curious, what is your relationship like with your readers? Because, in that situation, you were talking about how the comments gave you food for thought, about this very personal situation. So I'm
Mm.
curious if you learn things from the feedback you get from commenters.
Oh, 100%. I just put the link in the chat. Um, I take everything to heart at some level. I know how to dismiss, when people are like, "Oh, you're blah blah," coming at me like you're an ugly, fat feminist, blah blah. Those are easy to dismiss, even though you feel them, right? But most of my readers are so insightful, and some of them are starting to know me pretty well. Others are new to, they're just coming through for one piece, and seeing that it really gave me pause to see the number of women, and they were all women, who said, my mother or my whatever relative forced me to spend time with male relatives who made me deeply uncomfortable, and I'm still angry about it. And I have talked, it did lead to conversations with my kids who are upstairs right now, probably listening to me. And I have, my older daughter is now 18, and I'm like, it is your choice if you want to visit your grandfather. And that was hard for me because um, to me, I would never have them visit if it was like quite unsafe. Their whole lives, I've never let them be alone with their grandfather because he raised me and was verbally abusive. And it took many decades for me to be able to use the A word about it. I'd just be like, he yells a lot. He's uncomfortable. He's angry. I'm like, that's verbal abuse, Dana. And it took me a long time to come out from under that. I have always been there to, at least if when he says something egregious, to be like, okay, Dad, we're not going to talk about that. Redirect to protect them. But now that they're getting older, these essays help me realize like the decision is no longer only mine. And and then for my 18-year-old especially, I'm like, nope, she's an adult now. I told her like, I think an hour a year is a worthwhile investment of your time. And I mostly feel that way because I think it's important for her. He won't remember. He does not know we were there. That's the cruelty and sometimes the beauty of Alzheimer's, or just dementia. I don't know that he has Alzheimer's flavored dementia, but um he doesn't remember for good or for bad. Um but now I'm like, yeah, it's if that you own the decision if it makes you too uncomfortable to be there.
So
And so
that's we talked earlier about like how you approach writing about family and people close to you. So I was curious if you're open to answering about your kids because I mean, I have like a 1-year-old, so I'm always asking like people with older kids because I don't know. There's a lot that I don't write about what with her. I mean, that does not we haven't had that many things, but she's adopted, so I'm very sensitive to like her owning her story around that. And
Mhm.
but also like I think as kids get older, like they do become independent and their own person and obviously able to read. So, how do you approach your writing about your kids? Like, do they get to vet that? And do they read it? Like, do they want to read it? Or do they want to know? Or are they just like, that's your thing?
We stay in our own spaces online. Like I don't share that kind of writing where they and their friends live. And I don't use my real last name to be protective of who they are. The stories, of course, involve them. They are all very much through my lens. I'm very mindful about not putting words into their mouths. Um, and yeah, that's kind of the,
Yeah.
where the division happens. Um, I, I layer in an anecdote here and there from them, but a lot of the stories are either the focus is really more on me as the mom, or they're speaking to like broader cultural conversations, like the stuff about parenting and gender. It usually has like some anecdote, but as a proof point. But it's mostly more around like this is the audience I'm heading toward is other parents who are maybe facing the same thing. With parenting and gender, by the time I was writing about it, my child was through it. So it's that past tense thing again, not writing about something that's present and current. So it is tricky now.
Um, and I want to go back a little bit or stay on like writing as a process because you said you're writing an essay
Yeah.
every week. I mean, you have the Daily Whatever show. You're very active online and writing a lot about your life. Do you ever feel pressure or like do you look forward to that deadline? Because that's something I mean, and I'm selfishly asking this because I do a lot of other things that are not my own writing, and I'm trying to force myself to get back to writing because I think it's very hard. Like I am a
Yeah.
natural person who writes about their life, but when I step away from it, it's much harder to go back to it. I do think it is like sort of like exercise or things that you have muscle memory for, where
Yes.
you can get so removed from that kind of storytelling that then it starts to feel like, oh, like, how do I
Yes,
don't
it's
know,
absolutely a
reapproach?
muscle. Um, I do produce at least like the essay every week comes out on produce sounds so cold, but there is a lot of production work. It's funny that's where my word went to because the word I use because I do audio recordings in my own voice for every essay that goes on. I write out loud, um, but I have the intent of I write out loud is to become my home for creative nonfiction, and I have been writing for over 3 years. There's a lot of it was on Medium to start. And I've been published in a few other places, which has been lovely. And I'm like, no, this is the home where it's all going to live. So some of the essays are new and some of them are from my archive. So there are certainly weeks where I will find work from my archive and record it and share it. If I were writing a brand new essay every week and parenting, and I also have a full-time job, um, and the Daily Whatever show.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
that is a lot.
So that's the reason I'm able to keep up with it. And I'm like, one day I'm going to run out of essays to share. But I think there were well over 100 that I want to eventually bring over. And so with the hybrid approach, it will extend me for a while. And perhaps by then I will be more full time writing. That's kind of the dream, right? Writing
When
and
you are writing, like, what does it feel like? Do you enjoy the act of writing, or do you more enjoy having written, or do you enjoy both?
Oh, the feeling of putting a brand new essay that I'm really proud of out into the world is like no other. Like it's an elation. Um, so I might love that part of the feeling most of all, but I do love the writing process, and I also I get bent around it. Like right now, the essay I'm trying to hopefully get out the door for Monday is bent around an axle, so to speak. Like I'm a little knotted up in it. Um, And it's interesting. I don't have formal training as a writer. So I went to school for speech pathology, right? The voice I have developed, which is this memoirist voice, but with a heavy cultural and sometimes political lens. Like it's never just my own story. It's what's the broader cultural conversation? How do others relate to this story? That's something I very much come to on my own. Um, and I'm also lately been working to develop my voice with a slightly more journalistic style too, when I have a story that's a little bit more political or cultural than memoir. There's kind of a continuum. And so the one I'm working on right now, um, that I'm hoping will get out for Monday, I'm trying to lean into that more advice, third person perspective, but it's about. Do you want to hear the title?
Yeah.
I don't have the exact title yet, but it's basically around, hey, Gen X women, like we're entering our widower era because I have dated um, a a lot of widowers for someone who's only 55. But we're all coming into that age where, like, when I'm on dating apps as I am now, there are a lot of men who are widows who,
Who are, like, in their 50s?
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, the first one I met, he was still in his 20s. I was 30, I think,
Wow.
years ago. That was a tragic accident. But um, I have a lot of So I'm writing it sort of as an advice, like here's my wisdom I've gained, but I'm weaving personal story through it because otherwise it's not very interesting and I don't have authority to be writing it. And one of the stories is very recent and sort of still evolving. And because that, and also he is a reader and will see it. And it crosses into that, like, do I need to show or ask? I have written a little on this topic before, and that was when we were more actively dating. And so I did ask. But this one is my story, and I will not probably because we're not. Yeah, that it probably won't right now. Um, and so I'm bent around all of this. It's how to weave these parts together is proving very tricky. And there's also just the question of time, right? It's graduation weekend. we were at a party last night. We have another event tonight. I have my own podcast tomorrow morning, the Sunday Salon, for my paid subscribers, which is really super fun because we will be talking more about Father's Day. And I do tend to provide a bit more behind the scenes stuff that I don't share on public lives there, and we all share our stories. So and then the weekend's over and I have to have it recorded. So there may be that essay may not be ready for Monday. I may put one from my archive if ultimately I'm like, it's not ready to be born yet, because with ChatGPT and Claude and all these agents, I feel like people are turning stories around really fast. And I'm not saying they're all written by AI, just you can use it to expedite. And I have to think a lot of people who are super prolific have help, or even if they don't, if they're just that prolific, good on them. I am very slow and methodical. And
It's funny because, like, the people I read that I, subscribe to,
yeah,
I mean, if they're using AI, I don't think they are, because mostly I know who they are or I know of them, but, it doesn't read like that. And then but I do these roundups about, objects every week for this
yeah,
section of Open Secrets, and so I'll go into Substack and, like, search certain terms, and I'll get to these headlines that are like, "Oh, that sounds like it's gonna be totally
yeah,
on topic about, like, possessions or clutter or keepsakes or whatever," and then I'll read it and I'm like, "This is very," like, if it was not written by AI, it sounds like it was written by AI, and then, like, I'll go through, like, 3 of those in a row, and I'm like, "Oh, that's what a lot of people are doing here." So,
yeah,
because I am so, I mean, you might not think it because, like, I write a lot of for different places, but, like, I get so my own newsletter, like, I super admire what you're doing because my newsletter, it's so hard for me to write, like, I haven't written one in months because I'm like,
yeah,
well, it has to be perfect, and it has to recap, then if it's been months, like, it has to recap what's been happening, and it has to go into this, and then, like, lately I've been depressed, but then I don't wanna just be like, "Oh, I'm so depressed," because then I don't wanna make other people depressed. I go through so many iterations and then I just,
right.
like, don't write anything.
Girl,
And I get so frustrated with myself, and then but the anyway, so it's just so, like, I really admire what you're doing because your essays are essays, like, they are not just, like, dashed off blog posts, like, they're very
no,
full stories, and there's they sound like they kinda, like, rolled off your pen type fingers,
thank
they
you.
sound
They did
not in a
not.
bad way, like, they sound very, like you did work to connect them, but they flow is what I'm saying, beautifully, but, like, in a way that sounds like you just thought it up and, like, put it down. So I'm always curious, like, what
Oh,
the process is of, like,
oh,
how to sound like that every week, because it's hard.
it is. It's funny sometimes. Um, I still draft all my essays in Medium because that's where I started and it's familiar. And I will write drunk, not literally, but with my mind wide open. And sometimes I will shift and move to my thumbs. I'll do it on my phone and I will just blurt. Sometimes this is something I do use AI for, where I will speak it in and I'll be like, capture this. I'll be driving home from work and I will just I suppose I could open a voice memo and cut and paste it, but sometimes it's like 3 or 4 different things. And then I'm like, summarize what I just said. And I will take that as a chunk, and I'll take these blurts. But then what's funny about my process that shifted is it was always late night in the past where I would be like, this is the only time I can carve out. And like once a week or so, it's like, I'm going to have a 3 a.m. night and I'm going to get up really tired for work the next day, but I have to birth this baby of a story. And because of the Daily Whatever show, that was a 5:30 alarm every day, 5 days a week for the last 15, 16 months. Um, my essay writing went way down because there simply wasn't that late night creative time. This summer, Lawrence and I are only on 1 day a week. We're just doing Fridays until probably mid-September till I get my daughter off to college. Um, and this is part of the reason why is that I'm like, I need that space to be able to write more. Because as much as I love podcasting, like writing is what the podcasting centers on, right? This is the primary body of work is my
And it's not,
right.
I mean, I do think you can schedule a time and you can force yourself to sit down and write, but, like, it's not like it's always gonna be
No.
good. And like, I think I've struggled because a lot of times my essays do kind of flow because I've been thinking about them for like weeks or months, or it's just whatever creative, like, and so then I get used to that. And then when they don't, I'm like, oh, this sucks because it's not just like bang, bang, bang. And like, that is
Right.
very frustrating for me because I'm like,
Absolutely.
I'm not used to, like, I don't tend to force myself to sit down. And like this week I did, and it was slow. It was really slow. And like, it wasn't terrible what came out, it was okay, but, like, it was not my favorite, but I was like, "Okay, they can't all be your favorite," like,
Right. And come back
uh
to it. Like, that was me on Wednesday because Wednesdays and Thursday evenings, my kids are at their dad's. And so sometimes that's my time to write. And I was like, sweet, I have this time. And I was writing and writing. I have a ton written, but I'm like, this is directionally not great. And this is also like, um, to be direct about AI, like I don't have AI write for me, obviously, but I did plunk it into Claude and say, like, what's wrong? And it was like, well, you're basically writing three different essays and you're not quite making the point of any of them. And structurally, here are my recommendations. And I'm like, thank you. Because I have no formal diagnosis, but I'm pretty sure this ADHD brain is like a blurt of ideas. And sometimes the hardest part is being like, what's the point I'm trying to make to myself? It can give me a nudge directionally of like, this part, you should keep this part, maybe goes in a different essay, or at least you have to tie them together because they're disparate. And I'm like, thank you. So
I mean, yeah,
tonight I'm hoping to revisit it, but you're right, the muse may not be here tonight. It
no,
just,
I mean, I think it's important to, like, demystify that, like,
yeah.
I think you're right, your essays are beautiful, but, like, I think it can seem very easy, like, someone who's prolific is just always prolific and always on, and, like, I don't and some people might be, but I don't think most writers that's always the
Oh
case.
yeah. If you saw early drafts, you would just be like, Dana, that's awful, right? It's a craft. It like I used to like roll my eyes when um like I'd hear interviews with like musicians or writers and they'd be like, oh, well, there's my process. And I'm like, that's so arrogant. Now I'm like, oh no, I get it actually. There is part of it that you can nurture by having a practice. And then there's the part that like some days it hits and my thumbs cannot get the idea in fast enough, right? And I'm just like, I have to get this down, I have to get this down, I have to get this down. And other nights you'll be like, I've carved out space and it's just not coming. And my advice would be like, write through those times, but know that you're going to have to come back when the muse is there. Like there's still a reason you're getting those words down, even though they may not be final, but it's a
Yeah,
good
or just make
practice.
bullet points or make note like, I think we think writing is only, like, full sentences, paragraphs, but, like, it can be notes, it can be research,
Yeah.
it can be reading and, like, giving
Yeah.
yourself, "Okay, I wanna reference this." And I also think, like, everyone has different times that they naturally write, and, like, I just read Lindy West's memoir, Adult Braces, which,
Mm.
um, if you have read anything about it online, I highly recommend reading it 'cause there's much more than what is go and
So,
yes, the discourse is about a lot of these dramatic things, but a lot of it I found was about writing and her relationship with her writing and with her audience, but what I was gonna say is that she talked about how she was like, "Everything you've ever read of mine that you've enjoyed, I wrote from 5 to 7 a.m." and not the, like, I get up so early, like, having been up basically all night and, like, it was not a healthy it does not sound like it was a healthy process, like, she was, like, stressed out, and she was like,
panicked.
"What if I had been nicer to myself and, like, not done it in such a
Right.
stressful way?" And I thought that was so interesting because, like, when you're reading a final product, you have no idea unless you hear from the writer, like, what trauma or stress or effort went into it you know, unless they share that. And so, like, I thought that was just really telling that, even writers who are, published authors or successful or whatever, like, you know, you don't know what it's costing them to get those words on the page.
100%. And Lindy's from Seattle, as I am. I've met her a few times. We have a lot of mutual friends. I adore her. I love her work. I have not read Adult Braces yet, and this is the nudge I need to go buy the book because I've read so much about it. and all the press that she did around it was, I mean, in my mind, I'm like, man, I hope that was all part of the press junket, and I hope she sold a shit ton of books from it. I know her husband, Ahime Hifale, is an amazing playwright. I've seen his work. Her sister-in-law is Ijoma Oluo, who, has her own amazing body of work. They're all kind of Seattle treasures, and I'm like, but man, the way that it was portrayed in the media was not kind to her. So I do need to go in and read the actual source material, though, because it seemed like everybody had a hot take, and I bet most people didn't even read the book.
I mean, I think I read a lot about it beforehand, which sometimes I don't read a book when it's like so overhyped. I feel like, okay, like I'm being almost forced to read it because like everyone else is
Right.
reading it, and then I resist. But I think for writers, I mean, a lot of it was about like her relationship with her writing and how her past writing was honest to some degree, but not fully. Like there was more going
Right.
on, and I think it makes you realize that writers, memoirists are always telling a version of their lives. And like this is also a
Right.
version. And she even admits, like, I may later look back on this differently, or this may or may not, she does not necessarily wrap it up in like, and we all live happily ever after. It's more like
Right.
this is what we're doing now. But I thought like sort of this revision of a past published work, like her book Shrill was and some of her other work was very interesting, and and I
I
think
love
that
Thrills.
all we can do as writers is if we're writing about current circumstances, is write about where we're at right now. Like we can't predict what we're going to be doing in the future or how we're going to look back, and I think that is why it is important to capture the things, even just for yourself in real time, because you forget even one day to the next. Like, like I was just thinking about how like I was like, oh, this was such a shitty week, and I was like, wait, like some good things happened, but like I didn't write them in my journal necessarily. I didn't really note
Right.
them anywhere, and if I don't, then like it's easy to feel like, oh, or like miss little nuances that you might want to go back to. So
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah, it is a whole process. And I will also say to you, like, you have a baby. Don't be hard on yourself about not writing right now. Like, the fact that you're still working and running Open Secrets and keeping it so vital and active with such a young child at home is remarkable. So pat yourself on the back for that.
Thank
My
you.
children are older, they are 16 and 18. It gets a lot easier when they have their own lives. And I'm like, it's my night. We're going to be hanging out. And then they're both like, no, we're both busy. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'll write tonight then because,
I mean,
you know,
she does go to sleep at like 6 o'clock. So I do have my
okay.
nights free, which is, I know some people with kids who are like one,
My
two,
kids were
who
not.
are up to like 9, 10, and I'm like, oh no. I mean, she does get up early, but I get up early anyway, so it's okay. Okay, I don't want to keep you all day. So for people who are like Open Secrets people who might not be following you, can we put your Substack in the
Yes.
chat again?
I will
And
absolutely go grab it.
Um,
Oops.
and yeah, and I put Dana's essay about her stepfather at the front of Open Secrets right now, or if you can't find it, it's in our parenting and family section. Okay, that is a very like, oh, geez, oops, sorry. I went to, I didn't realize it shows it right there. It started talking to me. Oh, it's called "What Do I Owe a Father Who Betrayed My Trust?" And uh, other essay we were talking about on I Write Out Loud is called "The Father I Got versus the Father Dementia Gave Me." Thank you,
Yes.
everybody, for watching, commenting, and thank you, Dana. No, I've learned so much, and I like that, like you revisit topics. That you didn't just write the one. Like I read that recent one, but I've been going back and reading some of the other ones about your dad, and I think it's like an interesting layering because you learn more
Yeah.
about the situation as you read.
Thank you so much. And I've been like, I almost have a book. I have like 8 or 9 essays now about my dad that I'm like, some people might call that a book, Dana. But that's next frontier. I've not had my own book published yet. I've been published in a couple of the Memoirist quarterlies with essays about my dad. But yeah, I would love if you would all subscribe and follow along. I am so honored to be here. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank
This
you.
has been lovely.
Thank you.
gonna go make breakfast for my kids now.
Okay. Have a good
Take care,
weekend.
everyone.
Okay.
Happy
Bye.
Father's Day to all. Bye.
Bye.